Okay, we're going to remove the tie rod end from the steering spindle, and you can use a couple different tools or techniques to do it. If you loosen up the nut right here, you can actually use the tie rod spreader right here, but I would not recommend doing that, because if you use this, you're going to actually tear up the boot, and it won't be able to hold grease. So the preferred method is actually use a hammer. Now, how the heck do you use a hammer on this thing? Well, it's pretty straightforward. The first thing you do, of course, is you loosen up the nut. And I already removed the cotter key on this. So I can loosen this thing on up. It's actually pretty loose right now. You want to keep the nut still on there. The reason being is if you do use your hammer and you miss, the last thing you want to do is actually damage the threads. Much better off to hit the nut as compared to the actual thread on there. And then next, I would recommend using some hearing protection, and then heave ho on it. It should pop right on off. So that's a pretty straightforward way of removing the tie rod end from the spindle assembly. And now you can do whatever it is you need to do for your spindle, or your tie rod end for that matter. Well, I want to actually show you, how to check the amount of torque it takes to turn the spindles with the full weight of the vehicle on the truck. And now, of course, I have Moog ball joints on it, and it doesn't take any torque at all to turn the wheel. Again, I've got the jacks, and the jack stands off the vehicle. It's the full weight of the truck. And I've got my two plates right down here. One of them, of course, it's lubricated in between the two. 16 gauge plates. I have a 3/4 inch piece of plywood. Just want to get it set on a nice flat platform. And use your torque wrench. Set your torque wrench to 100 foot-pounds, and put a big old bolt on the end of your spindle that hooks up to your tie rod end. And I'll show a picture of that in just a few moments. And you just turn your wheel and see how much torque it takes. And by the way, on my old ball joints that had no Zerk fitting, it took over I think 115 foot-pounds just to turn one of the spindles. And that's for one side, and of course the other side, so you've got 230 foot-pounds just to turn the wheels left or right, and that's a lot of force. Now, I mean, I can take this and turn it without any effort. So that just goes to show how much a difference the lubricated ball joint can make on your steering system. So it tracks easier, it returns to the center just like you would expect with the right set of caster, and it's definitely an improvement. So don't overlook this part. It's kind of a bummer if you have to replace the ball joints, but I would recommend it if it turns out that they're very, very stiff or there's a lot of friction in them. And again, when you do this, make sure that you get yourself a good ball joint. I got Moog, but you can get any brand you want, but I just don't want to do this again. I want to do it right the first time. So, highly recommended. I have a torque wrench all set up here just to give you an idea how to go ahead and check how much torque it takes to turn the spindle. And I just put a big old bolt in here. Hook up your torque wrench. I've got a clicker here. If it's 100 foot-pounds that the spec is, set it at 100 pounds and see if it clicks, and keep on going on up from there to find out how much torque it actually takes to turn that spindle. And that'll give you a good idea of whether or not those things need to be replaced. So, pretty straightforward. Now if you go ahead and replace your ball joints on your spindle, you might as well go ahead and do a little bit more maintenance on your front drives. and so I replaced all the seals in here on both sides, and as well as on the actual spindle assembly. It can be a little bit tricky getting one of the seals on in, but if you look online, you'll find that you can make a very simple tool to drive those seals on. And really all this is a piece of pipe with a specific type of flange. I did a little bit of grinding on the perimeter there to get that to the right diameter, but with this tool, it goes together rather easily. So highly recommend that you go through and do the job right, replace all those seals while you have it apart. And as you can see, I've got, you know, my you can barely see down there. I've got a Zerk fitting on the top. There's a you can't see it. There's actually a cap on the top here. This is greasable, but because of the front drive, you have to replace, or actually put in the Zerk fitting when you're going to do it. But when you're ready to grease it down, you know, you can remove that cap, put the Zerk fitting on in there, and grease it on up, and you're ready to go. So it's a pretty straightforward job. You know, the hard part about getting the ball joints on out is really to separate them from the spindle assembly. You know, because this is the way it's designed, you know, the way you need to do this is you need to take out the front axle, the axle in there first, then you can remove the nuts, and really the spindle just drops it out. But getting these ball joints separated from the spindle can be a bit of a challenge. Make sure you get yourself a nice tool. You can go down to AutoZone and get the tool for it. That's what I did, but I actually ended up using a press in order to get those things on out, because it was in there pretty darn good, at least on this case. But there's some other YouTube videos that online that you can actually see and for the ball joint replacement. But again, you know, I think a lot of trouble that people are having is really related to, you know, the friction that the people see in the spindles, and as a result, you know, it's making everything else worse. So, you know, if you have, you know, if it's greater than 100 foot-pounds to turn this spindle, and another greater than 100 foot-pounds to turn the other spindle, I mean, you've got a lot of effort just to turn the cotton picking thing, and that's going to make everything else wear out a whole lot faster, because it has to create a humongous amount of force just to turn the thing from left to right. So, and I think that may be why a lot of people are having to replace steering gear after steering gear, because, you know, they fix it and then the steering gear goes bad. So, and I believe many of those root cause issues are related to the actual ball joint itself. I don't have any data to support it, but I just have to believe that that's a big contributor. So I think that pretty much covers this part.